You're listening to Inside the Numbers, the sports performance podcast brought to you by RockDaisy AMS. I'm your host, Cody Hughes, and today we have on Coach Justin Ochoa. Justin is a strength conditioning coach working in the private sector based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. I've known Justin now for a few years on social media and seen his content in a lot of different places, including his own profile pages, Simply Faster, Vitruvian, and a few others. I've always wanted to talk to him and get to know him and see what his journey is like and where he's fitting in the niche of basketball strength conditioning. This story is so interesting. He did not get into this game traditional at all. No internship, no GA. And you'll really want to hear how he got into this industry. Now he operates out of a facility where he is a hybrid coach on the basketball skill development side, while also working the strength conditioning and physical preparedness at the same time and being able to go deep dive at an individual level. He trains a lot of pros across European overseas leagues, G League players, and even high-level high school players looking to go play basketball at the college level. We tap into some technology, RSI testing, velocity-based training, and a few other things that he does to look individual for his athletes' needs and how he's able to take an approach that's a lot more detailed that a team sports strength coach might not be able to. I think you guys will really enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the inside. Welcome to Inside the Numbers, the RockDaisy Sports Performance Podcast with your host, Coach Cody Hughes. Join us to unlock the secrets behind athletic performance as we break down the metrics and transform your collected data into powerful, actionable insights. Tune in for exclusive interviews with top coaches and professionals who are revolutionizing their training programs with data. If you love what you hear, please share it on X, Instagram, and YouTube, and tag us at RockDaisy AMS. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Inside the Numbers. I am your host, Cody Hughes. Today I got on Coach Justin Ochoa. Justin, what's going on, man?
How you doing, man? Hey, it was good to catch up with you before the show. Hopefully we didn't get through all the good content before the show.
No, I know. I was like, hey, man, we got to shut up, man. We're talking about some good stuff. Yeah, no doubt. Well, I've followed you on social media for a while. I feel like we think a lot alike. We both really utilize things like VBT and things. But one thing I'm actually interested in hearing first is your journey into this thing. I know you've had a very unconventional journey, into strength conditioning. You weren't kinesiology major, into GA, into college assistant, into private, or whatever that is. It's actually looks a little bit different for you. So I'm curious to what that journey looks like.
Yeah, very, very different, man. So, essentially I never had that traditional path that you mentioned. I didn't major in this, didn't have an internship, no GA, anything like that. So I was just kind of a late bloomer in terms of what I wanted to do with my life. Once, as you grow up playing sports, you kind of identify as a basketball player or a baseball player or whatever. So when that road closes for you, then you're like, okay, who am I without basketball? Who am I without my sport? Like, what am I even into? So, about halfway through college, I'm thinking I want to be like the next Stuart Scott or Scott Van Pelt or something like that.
Yeah.
So at the time I'm majoring in telecommunications, actually, which was like more media based. So it's actually relevant now because here we are on a podcast, which is, all media based. But at the time I'm like, this is it's not it. You know what I mean? Like, by my sophomore year of college, I had stopped playing basketball and I'm just a student now. So I'm like, okay, let's figure this thing out. And, eventually I started missing being on a team. I started missing sports and being around the locker room and things like that. So I'm like, how can I get back to this? Started coaching basketball in the summer with my old AAU programs. Started, hitting back with my old coaches, trying to learn more about skill development. And then, long story short, like you said, to make a super long story short, I eventually fell upon like strength and conditioning. Like that, this is how I can get back to the game. This is how I can, kind of work my way back into the sport and make an impact on these athletes, because I was lucky enough in high school, back in 2004 to 2008 to have a really good strength coach named Brian Clark, who introduced me to, this concept.
You went to Noblesville?
I went to Warren. So I was at Warren.
Got it. Okay,
and then he went to Noblesville after that. But Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah,
So
Brian's a legend in the high school game, man, for sure.
legend. So he was my strength coach at Warren, and introduced me to like what this is as as a career and as a mentor to young men and women, coming up in the high school ranks. So long story short, man, I graduated with that telecommunications degree, and immediately took a job at a radio station and started my fitness business on the side.
Okay.
So, I'm working before and after my 9 to 5 for about a year until I have enough clients to make that leap of faith. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, whole time I'm self-educating. I'm reading T Nation. I'm reading Simply Faster, Breaking Muscle. I'm buying DVDs from Mike Robertson and Eric Cressy and Joe DeFranco. And, I'm getting every certification that the NASM has to offer, thinking like that's what you need to do. But I'm just trying to be legitimate, you know what I mean? Because I couldn't get a job at any gym because I don't have any formal education or references or background in this other than I like to work out, and I'm learning how to teach others to do the same. So 2012 to 2014, I was just gaining experience, training people, anybody, moms, dads, athletes, whoever. I ended up getting a job at a gym basically that just opened and kind of said, look, hey, I got this marketing background. You guys need marketing. But I also have now about 1.5 years of experience of training people. Like, let's do this. I'll just kind of play that dual role. And, I was there for 4 years until I decided to leave and open up my own space. But that was really a good, a solid foundation for me because I got to train everybody. I got to train all different types of goals, from general pop to athletes and everything in between. And then it also helped me figure out, like, the whole time I knew I wanted to get back to basketball, but I know that you can't just skip steps. You have to kind of go through the ranks. And, I always tell the story of not having an internship, but I actually enrolled in Mike Robertson's gym at the time as a paying client and just got a membership there, trained there as an athlete, basically.
Yeah.
And just said, hey, just give me a little extra. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not asking for special treatment, but tell me why you're doing things this way and, show me some things. And the whole time I was just picking up stuff from them. I trained with a guy named –
That's really cool.
Yeah. I trained with Ty Terrell. That was like my primary trainer. He's been in the NBA now for a number of years. I think he just went back to college as their head performance coach, but got to train with, all these dudes that went on to be like high level coaches, but they were right here in Indy, and I was just paying my little $2.99 a month or whatever it was.
Yeah, but hey, that's a really interesting point. Like, I almost feel like that could be so valuable for a lot of other coaches if they have that opportunity. You just happen to be in Indy.
Yeah.
And IFAST happened to be there. If you guys don't know who Mike Robertson is, you probably should go look him up if you're listening to this. An unbelievable private sector strength coach and worked with all kind of athletes and been in the game for a long time. His podcast is like the Physical Preparation Podcast. Go listen to it. It's really good. So, but you just immersing yourself into that culture as an athlete, but were you going into it with a mind frame of like, okay, this will also help me learn the game?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I essentially, it's kind of crazy how it happened. Like, I knew of Mike because of, self-educating and that process, but I was on Groupon actually back then. So boys don't even know about Groupon.
Throwback.
They were running a special for like a free assessment and like free session or something like that. I said, oh shit, I gotta go. So I went in, I met, Bill, I met Mike, and essentially I told them I want to train, cause I'm still trying to stay in shape and get better. But I also am on this path of basically trying to become what you are and what you guys have. So they understood what it was from the jump and were super cool about it. And, even to the fact where when I did get that job at the gym, I'm like, okay, I don't necessarily need to train here anymore. But I was under contract with them and they waived it and was like, dude, go do your thing. Like, congratulations. Like, we stay in touch. I still see Mike every now and then. But yeah, it's all love. Like I actually I had back surgery in 2017 and went to Bill for my pre-surgery rehab and stuff like that. So Great dudes over there, man. They do a great job. A cool little part of my story to be able to, put myself in that situation, even though I didn't have that formal background. I'm like, I can make something shake. You know what I mean? Like
For
I'll
sure.
go figure it out. So that's just kind of always been my mindset. And, ever since then, I got mad respect for the dudes over at iFast and everything they do for the industry.
Yeah. So, your journey brings up an interesting point to me. In strength and conditioning, there's a lot of argument of qualification, and there's this double-edged sword to me of if we create this standard of some type of licensure, you have to have an exercise science degree, you have to have a certain certification, it's going to help weed out some of the trash we see on social media or people with the extreme low barrier to entry. But it also will weed out the guys that had the massive passion like you had, that
Right.
just loved it to the point where they self-educated and wanted it so bad that they put themselves in the environments to learn this game and end up being a really good coach. Because I hate to say it, Justin, but there's plenty of folks with alphabet soup behind their name that can't coach themselves out of a wet paper sack. They just can't. And they rely on this some type of hierarchy, pedestal feeling of I have this credential, but nobody, like, you haven't coached anybody. You don't have any skin in the game. So I commend you, on pursuing that and saying, I'm going to find a way. Like, that's just my mindset, and that's any coach out here listening to this, that if you want to get into strength conditioning, just like I had an intern come and interview with us the other day, I told him the same thing. I said, look, this is not going to be easy. This is a saturated market full of people who think they want to do what we do. But if you want it bad enough and you'll last long and you'll work hard, you'll find your way. But it weeds a lot of people out. So I just wanted to hit on that because that is amazing to hear. That's a crazy journey, and it seems like you're doing a really great job now and getting to a spot where you feel comfortable, which seems like basketball. Like, basketball is your jam, man. Like, I see all your content, and now you're in this spot at your facility doing a little bit of both. So tell me about how your facility runs and, like, who you're serving and what that looks like.
Yeah. So, like I said, over the last 10 years, I've really refined kind of what I do, right? And who I am as a coach. And I've worn a lot of hats in the game. I've coached high school on the bench. I've been a high school basketball specific strength coach. The cool thing about being on the private side is you get to dip and dive in and out of what you know what I mean? Like, I got extra time. Okay, I'm gonna go coach a season of basketball. So, I've been a consultant role. I've coached AAU. I've had a random stint 2 years with the pro hockey team here in Indy. So, like I said, I've culminated all this experience over the last decade, and really within the last 3-4 years, figured out like what I do best, and that is just basketball preparation. Right.
Love it.
So I've narrowed it down to where I have 2 football guys that are grandfathered in that have been rocking with me since day one. And if you're a football guy, you hit me up. I have plenty of people I can hook you up with that are great at that. But right now I'm focused on basketball only. So, essentially my facility, and that's a whole story in itself of, kind of the facility and the journey of owning a place and then getting out of that and subleasing another place. Like that's a whole nother podcast. But right now I essentially have partnered with this basketball facility that was pre-existing. It's similar to like a Shoot 360 concept if you're familiar with that.
Yeah,
but
we have one here in Huntsville. So yeah.
Dope. So it's called Hoosier Shooting Academy, and this guy Paul Schwartz, he opened it up in 2020 in the midst of COVID. We got like 16 rims, half court, a bunch of Dr. Dish machines, some cool tech, and then he had this parent lounge, right? This like 1,000 square foot parent lounge that I was like, no, I want that. That's my weight room upstairs.
Yeah.
And so I flipped that to a weight room, and now I'm able to do my on-court stuff downstairs and my weight room stuff upstairs. And we've got a nice little thing going where, essentially I'm really, really heavily focused on like the higher level players. So, your pros, your high level high school or college players that want to become pros. And I'm really focused on that off season, like 3 to 4 month chunk where I'm really just trying to get athletes in, make a good relationship with them if I don't already have that, and then try to be that kind of, concierge for them throughout the season if they need me, like almost like a retainer type deal. So that's kind of what my model has been, where I'm busting my ass in the summertime training, 40, 50 high level athletes in that window. And then, I'm kind of with them throughout the season, or communicating with their team, or just being a resource for them. And then that frees up time during this season. If I want to go coach, I can coach. If I want to do podcasts with you, I can do that, do some stuff with Vitruv. So it's kind of my off season right now until, they come back for the off season.
Sweet. Awesome, man. Love that. And you're curating a lifestyle that you want to live. That's another thing. You worked really hard to get to a point where you can do that, which I think is amazing. Now, let's talk just hoops training. Like, as far as, training the basketball player, like, I just want you to hit on some highlights of, like, all right, here's kind of what, I'm seeing is most important, for how you evaluate a player, where you go with the strength training side, how you're blending the skill side. And maybe we should start in this part right here. So the commonality of training a basketball player is that they hate lifting weights. And we understand that for a couple of reasons. One, they're long-levered athletes, so they have a hard time leveraging barbells. Therefore, they're not good at it or perform well at it typically, so they shy away from it. Next is there's not a ton of true, I'm going to be careful when I say this because, like, it's not always true. So, like, you can be not that physical and still be an extremely valuable basketball player. Meaning you could be on a very skillful side, but as we all know, like, adding physical ability to those skills only enhances it. So when it comes to earning the trust, of basketball players and what you've seen basketball training looks like over your, experience, where do you feel like basketball strength conditioning's missing the boat? Does that make sense? Like, I would just, I'm trying to lay out the question to where you can best answer it. So where, like, okay, sure, you can say, training is general. It's general physical preparation. We're going to squat, lunge, hinge, push, pull, blah, blah, blah. But I'm sure you're seeing a lot different, because you're working with a unique population. Like, when you get an athlete in, like, or, I'm scrambling here. Let's start here. Where do you feel like strength conditioning helps a basketball player the most?
So, from a general standpoint, I look at it like, every athlete is going to be different, right? Every athlete is going to move different. Every athlete is going to have pros, cons, strengths, weaknesses. They're going to have tendencies on and off the court. They're going to have habits, things that they've been introduced to before me. So when I get an athlete in, I just want to figure out, like, where are you at? You know what I mean? Where are you at? Movement wise, mentally, skill wise, career wise. Maybe you're in the G League and you want to make it to the league. You want that call up. Maybe you're a low level overseas and you're just trying to get to a top league in Europe or something like that. Maybe you're stuck on JV as a junior and you're trying to make varsity. So I'm trying to figure out where you at and where do you want to go? How can I help you get there? And just look at it from not only a physical aspect, but also from, like, a mental aspect, and also kind of a reality aspect. Like, let's get a real goal. You know what I'm saying? Let's get a real plan in place that is maybe more, catered to where you're at now. And then that's a checkpoint, right? You say you want to get from point A to point Z, but how can you get there without K first? You know what I'm saying?
No doubt.
So it's all about just trying to figure out where they're at. Sorry, I'm getting a delivery right now, so my dog might go crazy.
Oh, you're good.
And essentially, basically, once I establish that, I can then say, okay, let's get that plan in place. If you're lacking on the movement side, we'll tackle that. If you're lacking on the skill side, we'll tackle that. If it's everything, we'll tackle everything. But it's really individualized, because I do have the flexibility and the freedom to break it down to that individual level, and to the point where every single athlete is getting that individual plan. Every single athlete is getting that custom plan that's built for them. So it's not like a team atmosphere or kind of a group atmosphere, even though those are great models. I just have the luxury of being able to treat every single athlete like individual and
Okay.
then go from there.
So when it comes to, let's say, just the physical evaluation, so that makes sense hearing from the standpoint of you're just going to figure out what the most limiting factor is for them to get to their goal, and you're going to prioritize it.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty plain and simple.
Yep.
Let's say we got an athlete who's lacking physically. Okay, let's stay in this like that side before we jump. Thinking skill work. What are some of the common physical pieces that athletes are missing if you see it?
So this is probably not the most common answer that you would get when you ask this question, but I have this theory that the population I work with, let's say predominantly pro basketball players, were really, really good before they met me, and they're going to be fine without me, right?
Sure.
Let's just get that out the way. I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm some type of savior, right? Like, I'm good at my job, but I'm dealing with very, very special individuals. So I have this theory that they're so special at a young age, they get exploited for their talent, for coaches to win games, to feel good about themselves. And
Amen.
in that process, they skip developmental steps. If you're a phenom in the 4th grade, the coach is going to ride your coattail to get that trophy, to boost their ego, and maybe skip some steps that you should be using to develop, right? And that's just what it is. So what I feel that a lot of basketball players that I work with are lacking is like almost like childlike movement patterns. Like, I got pro hoopers that can't skip. I got pro hoopers that can't crawl.
Yeah,
like,
wow.
Like if you ask them to do like just low level pogo jumps, like it turns into like this weird, like almost like a gritty type thing where it's like, it's those fundamental patterns that we have to almost go back to and touch on. And then they learn them really quick because they are special, right?
Sure.
But the crawling, the skipping, the karaoke, just playful movements like that, almost like are like foreign to them. Because my theory, I don't know if that's right or wrong, but at some point in their young life, a coach was like, "You're good. Get them the ball. Don't worry about anything else. Just go get a bucket."
Right.
And we'll talk about like some of the skill pieces to that too that may be lacking because of that. But I think that they become a pro when they're too young, and they get treated and trained like a pro when they're too young, and they miss out on playing kickball, tag, simple games like that build in like those skills that have nothing to do with basketball, but that are good for your movement, like your patterns. And so I see a lot of sloppiness when they do those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's it's worth it to go in there and fine tune those because it adds that movement capacity and it gives them that freedom of movement. And then you could talk about strength and you could talk about power and all that, like, elasticity and things like that. But I think above all, like those athletes sometimes lack that. And I think filling those gaps is majorly powerful.
So when you're adding that into the program, I'm sure you might get some initial pushback, especially if the relationship's not really strong. And you got me doing skips, and crawling on the floor. Like, bro, I'm a pro hooper. What do you like? So how are they seeing the results from that to realize, oh, yeah, this is good for me?
So, I don't know if the correct term is like microdosing or whatever, but we definitely microdose it. So, and I'll, lay the groundwork on this is why we're doing it. This is what we're doing, but we're going to do it every day. And it's not like on your program, right? It's not like we're taking trap bar deadlift out and we're going to crawl and skip, but it's like dose that every day while simultaneously building those more common physical qualities. Then we can start to bridge the gap and maybe see some of the differences there. So within our warm-up, we build it in to maybe it's 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day where we're, using the battle ropes that I bought in 2012 to think that I was, getting people in shape as a tightrope now instead, right?
Yeah.
So we're walking on tight ropes, we're crawling on tight ropes, we're doing all these crawls and, walking on rock mats and just tumbling and things like that. One, because that's kind of the gap that we're trying to fill, but it also is a really good warm-up, gets your body temperature up, gets you through full range of motion at all these different joints. It gets you exposed to, hands and feet on the ground, try to get the stimulus back to those nerve endings. So we build it in the warm up, make it, a piece of the puzzle and not necessarily like the whole thing. That way we can just use it for what it is and get to the, kind of the meat and potatoes of the lift.
Okay. Yeah. And do you, what kind of dialogue do you get from your players after doing some of those things? Do they feel like, man, coach, I'm feeling loose. I'm feeling ready.
Oh,
or,
yeah. You always like, get those.
You get the psychological benefit too.
When you first introduce some of the weird stuff, right? It's like, come on, what do you got me doing, right? And I'm like, trust me. Look, I got you. I would not have you doing anything that I didn't believe in or that I haven't tried myself or seen success with for other athletes, right? Yeah. So once I explain the benefits and talk about kind of what we're doing, then that's, couple sets in, you start to feel okay, coach got me right. I'm feeling good. Like, then you start to get that buy-in. Then you can start to really get creative with the stuff. And then they may joke like, okay, you're wilding right now. But it's also like, I know coach has my back and I know he's doing it for a reason. So I'm not going to question it. Like, I'm going to do it. And you start to hear then you start to get the athletes that they'll ask for it. Like, hey, when are we gonna play spike ball again? Or when are we gonna play med ball volleyball again? Or, can we do some boxing? Like I do a lot of boxing, stuff like that. And it's like, okay, that's huge for me because now I know not only do they enjoy it, but they feel the benefits of it. So when you feel the benefits and enjoy it, it's like that's what you want. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that's awesome. I want to touch on the nature of your position being a blended strength coach and skill coach at the same time. I'm seeing a lot more of this. I used to take this stance when I was young and stupid, which, in 10 years I'll say the same thing about me now. But that, we need to let strength coaches do their job. We need to let position coaches do their job. And when you look at a sport like football, where there's so many dudes, you need manpower. So oftentimes it's really tough to do both. But in a sport like basketball, on a team where you're training 12 guys, 12 to 15 max, you can probably hold the bandwidth if you have the skill set to do both. And I know I've seen it, at the college level, recently with Corey Schlesinger when he was at Texas. His role was player development coach, where he could be both on the bench but also doing the strength conditioning and player health stuff. You probably see, that at the NBA level some too. But when it comes to getting respect from your players and knowing the sport itself, how valuable has that been, to get buy-in across the board? Because I feel like this is just the truth. In basketball, especially college, a lot of times all these strength coaches want these football jobs. And then if they don't get a football job, well, what's the next biggest money? It's basketball.
Yeah.
And then they get a basketball job based off of old buddy who knew who my brother's sister's, coach worked over here. Oh, he worked at so-and-so, so let's hire him. And then they get into basketball and they're this just big old rocked up dude who just been slinging weights. But we all know that basketball, is going to be played from the knee down a lot of times. So not taking care of the training could almost be a little more untraditional. And also the quickest way to earn a player's respect in the basketball world is picking up a basketball yourself and showing you're not actually just completely worthless with it. I played basketball in high school. So I remember going to practice early, here. And even when I was at the college level, at the Division II level, and they'd shoot it, coach. I pick it up. And my form doesn't look trash. It might not have went in, but eventually I catch a few, and I'm like, all right, I understand I'm white. If I can't shoot, that's a really big problem. With earning respect. So, knowing the game of basketball and being able to speak it to them, would you also suggest if you're a strength coach, to step out of your comfort zone and stop reading super training and maybe watch a little game film?
Oh, bro. Yeah, I mean, I got so many ideas right now where I want to go with this. Something that you said was if you have the bandwidth and the skill set, and that's a big thing for me. And it took time to develop the skill set. Like I said, I've had a lot of different jobs in the space of basketball, right? So to be quite honest, I was actually doing the player development stuff first because that was kind of just my entryway into meeting athletes.
Right.
But then I found that I was a little bit in more higher demand on the strength conditioning side and probably a better coach and polished in that area a little bit better. And so, long story short, I mean, when I reached out to some people that I respect in the industry, like on the basketball side, and just kind of, asked them their thoughts about, what do you think about me blending this? What do you think about, doing both, blah, blah, blah. Most people on the basketball side told me not to do it. And, you can look back and say they were maybe threatened, or, they just didn't understand my vision or whatever. But there was one guy that was like, yeah, I tried that 10 years ago. Like, it just doesn't work. And it just, like, for me, I was like, it didn't work for you.
Yeah.
But like, I'm different. You know what I mean? Like, that's
100%.
my mindset is like, I'm not you. I am different. I approach things so like aggressively with ridiculous intent that like it doesn't register to normal people.
Yeah.
Like how my brain is wired. Like my wife is always like, you're just, something's wrong with you. I'm like, yeah, I know, but that's what I do. Like I'm
obsessive.
I'm just, yes, it's not the same approach as you. You know what I mean? Not you, but the guy who was on the phone.
Correct.
And I'm like, okay, that tells me what I need to know, because he's using his experience on why he failed to try to like cast that on me. And I'm like, I don't go for that. I don't go for that. And that kind of turned me up a little bit, because I'm like, okay, that tells me that I'm on the right track, because it scares other people. And so, for me, I will shout out my guy, Bobby White, man. He told me go for it. He was like, you got to do it. Like, I'm starting to dabble in it. And this was maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. And he was like, I'm really liking what I'm seeing. And so that kind of gave me the confidence to even dive further into it, like, and just go for it. And for me, I think there's definitely like a give and take, right? I 100% agree. The performance side has to stay like 90% general with most athletes. And again, I'm working with people that's their job, but they still need the general performance, right? So a lot of times when I tell people what I do, their mind might always go to like, okay, well, they're on a cable machine doing rip throughs and jab steps, and it's not that, you know what I mean? It's not the mimicking of sports specific movements. On a rare occasion, I might find a position that is from the court that I want to mimic in the weight room and add load to. But in terms of like positioning, it's more of like giving them access to these positions rather than trying to load a position, or like
good point,
load a movement like a jab step or something like that. So we may dabble in that, but for the most part, it's give them access to the positions that they see in their sport, and go pretty general with the rest in terms of exercise selection and stuff like that. And they get really specific on the execution of it, working in like VBT and different speed zones and different ranges of motion and things like that. And then also doing both gives me full coverage of like their stress.
Yeah.
So now I can manage their volume better, to where if I know what they're doing in the weight room and I know what they're doing on the court, now I know what their total load is on their body for that day or for that week or for that month. And I can manage that appropriately and get them the best exposure to the right stresses at the right times to help them get to where they need to be without having 20 hands in the cookie jar and trying to communicate.
Yeah.
And now I take out that middleman, right? And I still work with athletes that may do other things with other people on the court or whatever, but just eliminating as many of the middlemen as possible, not to call them middlemen, but just, I mean, like the lack of communication, it makes it easy on everybody, because now we have full control. And if something doesn't go right, I know who to blame. It's me. It's my fault. So now it's me. I have to look at myself and say, how could I get better? Rather than, oh, well, their skills guy killed him and then he came to me and he's not lifting hard. So it's me. It's all on me. And I like that pressure.
Yeah. Love that. So I'm just going to throw something at you. I want to hear what you think. So oftentimes when you have conversations with basketball coaches, and from a strength and conditioning standpoint, they're not going to be like a football coach and be like, how much he bench, how much he squat. They're going to go, how high does he jump? Can you get this guy's vertical up? Or does a kid come to you and go, hey, I need to be able to jump higher? So in order to, fulfill that need of the ability to jump higher or jump development in general, how do you go about jump development?
So I kind of use the cheetah versus the rhino model, I guess, right? So like I said, all athletes are different and unique, but if I can at least bucket them as either a cheetah or a rhino, that gives me a starting point to customize from there. So using like a load velocity profile with Vitruv, and
Okay.
then I use a skyhook jump mat to get like RSI and stuff like that. So now, and a couple other tests, I use 3D maps for like a general mobility assessment. So
Okay.
I just want to see, like, are you strong and kind of slow, or are you really fast and kind of weak, right? So there's your cheetah versus your rhino. And then I can say, okay, they have a high RSI, but a medium to low trap bar 1RM. Okay, now we know what to focus on. Or they have a really high trap bar 1RM, but their RSI is terrible. Okay, elasticity is where they lack. So if I can use their weaknesses or use their strength to build their weaknesses all in a holistic manner, then that gives me the ability to kind of say, okay, we know why they can't jump high. Let's aid that and then try to kind of maintain some of their strengths and try to see if that gets them where they need to be.
Yeah, I feel like that's really in vogue right now is the, elastic versus strength driven, whether it's, your typical 2-foot jumpers versus your typical 1-foot jumpers.
Right.
That's not always true, right? But like it can, for the majority of it, it can. I think it's easy to understand. All right, I got this kid that's bouncy, and maybe if I add a little bit of strength to him, like we can kind of get this well-rounded and push it, in the right spot. But what about the kid that is strong that lacks elasticity? As far as the training side, how are you bringing up that elasticity?
So a couple different ways. I have 2 athletes that kind of fit this model. And what people don't think about is those strong athletes that might not be as elastic, they probably like that because they really love the weight room, right? And that kind of goes
Right.
against like some of the basketball, persona, because there are some meathead hoopers, right? So in those cases, like not always and, at the right time, but I'll go to like a contrast or a French contrast or some type of like complex training to still give them what they like that heavy load. But then I can contrast that with a jump or like a plyo or something like that. So I get what I want too. So I just wanted to throw that in there because it may not always be so obvious. Like some guys, they're like that because they love to lift.
Sure.
And so if you take that away, it's just, okay, we're going to do trap bar rebound jumps and we're going to do drop jumps until you get sick of them. Well, they kind of like that part of the process. So let's try to leave it in there if we can,
Gotcha.
if it makes sense.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
the way my program is set up is we will probably in a perfect world, maybe I see them Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? Well, part of their warm up is going to be kind of that playful stuff. Then we'll go into some plyos. Then we'll go to like some type of sprint or speed development piece for that day that kind of matches the stimulus that we're going to see in the weight room. So with those athletes, those are going to be the ones that might get the more extensive plyos during their warm up. They might get some of those, drop jumps, depth jumps. I use a plyo box a lot, a Polish box, excuse me.
Sure.
Just try to build that elasticity in there. Then we'll go into our sprint or something like that. And then in the weight room, it may be some of those more like high velocity lifts. But if it is that athlete that really likes to lift, then it might be something heavier or more, moderate to heavy load with some type of contrasted plyo so that we can still get both ends of the continuum there.
So you said using RSI. Is that something that you really like and value?
I do. I like it. And it's been consistent for me for like almost 10 years now. So I feel like I'm so attached to it now that that's what I do. You know what I mean?
So good. Well, this is good because this is where you and I can riff a little bit because I've actually found it to be not that valuable for my setting. So I want to learn from you. And the reason why is because when it comes to an RSI score specifically, and I've tested many athletes on it, and I've even found some people that, and maybe this is just a misdiagnosis of me thinking it means something that it's not, but it seems like the equation of RSI is going to take ground contact time. It's going to be more valuable than jump height. And sometimes any athlete, if it's going to be scored, they're going to try to leverage whatever it takes to score the best, regardless of the constraints you give them. Like, hey, jump fast and jump high, whatever it's a 4.2 test, a 10.5 test, and they score relatively well. And I'm like, that's not, you're not the kid I would think that would score well in that, and
Right.
that may be a user error on my point, which I'll 100% admit. But how are you utilizing RSI? Where's the value coming from it? And like, what is it truly telling you? And is there ways that you actually execute the test that are going to help you weed out maybe some of those issues that I've said?
Mm-hmm. Those are all valid questions for sure. And things that I've heard as well, from other coaches that are like, I just don't see the value. Well, for me, again, it is my population. So I know how high school kids are sometimes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
they might not always be the most focused and easy to work with. So for me, RSI has become kind of a double-edged sword, I guess in a good way, and partially using it for like a readiness test as well.
Okay.
So basically I just have so many jumps that it's like I'll go to your first point about kind of the cheating, right? Or trying to just go really fast and you're not getting the height and trying to like take advantage of the little bit more weight on the ground contact time. Well, over a certain amount of times, like I just kind of know where that athlete's air time or jump height should be.
Okay.
And if it's an outlier to the point of like, I don't believe in that, I can look and say, okay, I see why. Because you're averaging here and that one you're here. And so we're going to redo that just to make sure it wasn't a fluke.
Mm-hmm.
And so, obviously working with a smaller volume of athletes at a time, I have the luxury to do that, right? In a setting where it's a little bit more chaotic, that might not be possible. But for me, it goes back to like all data to a certain extent is going to tell a story, right? It's like, okay, we're going to see how they feel on this day versus this day. So one of the readiness piece became kind of popular because I'm like, okay, there's a link between this kind of neuromuscular fatigue and how they're feeling, or, there's a link to their performance and if they're making progress or not. So if I can start to quantify these things, then not only am I going to incentivize them to do their best on it at all times, because they know that if I see a drop, I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions they don't feel like answering, or I'm going to probe and figure out kind of what's going on, or maybe potentially take away a training opportunity or a lift that they like, or a intensity change or something like that. So it kind of like self-regulated in the sense of every time we do it, and we'll normally do it like every Monday, they do it to the best of their ability to try to maximize their score the way that they always do it, because they know that's just the standard. And so it kind of became like this thing where, okay, I don't have too many people trying to cheat on it once they learn how to do it, right? Once they, it's kind of ugly at first, when you're teaching somebody, they're maybe spending too much time on the jump height, and I'm like, no, you got to get off fast. And then the next time they're like, look like they're jumping rope or spazzing out, and I'm like, no, you got to jump high too. So good point.
You
know what I mean? So
yeah, that makes sense.
Looking at that,
on the especially with any tech or any test, learning from me as how I was as a young coach using a lot of tech to now is that like you have to accomplish the understanding of the skill of the test itself.
Yep.
And like maybe the first chunk of your data is just like acquisition data, and it's not even something to really take into account. Like you almost don't even really want to set a baseline until you feel like the skill has been somewhat acquired. So then you have a real baseline, and then you see true adaptation rather than, because it's really easy to fall for, hey, first time you ever did it, you've never done it before, so you sucked, and then I just taught you how to do it really well, and then I've got this faux improvement.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so easy to do. And so it might be a month before I'm like, that's valuable. You know what I mean? That's how we value that. And I could probably boost my ego and make it look like the athlete went from a 2.5 to a 3.8 in an off season, but
Yeah.
part of that is they learned how to do it. And once they learn how to do it, that's when you might get a 0.05 improvement or a point, 0.02 improvement and still be happy with that because they're already here and you got them a little bit higher, right? So there is a little bit of subjectivity built into that. And part of that is just kind of knowing the athlete and kind of how they move and, what they're good at and how long it takes them to learn these types of skills. But the cool thing is that I do have a lot of athletes that have been with me for years, like 7-8 years now.
Sure.
So although the data may not be apples to apples because I've used different products in the past, it is cool still to see where they were when they truly were like this, the beginner, like, oh my God, you could not figure this test out, to now you're getting like a 4.0. That's really cool to see that growth, and still knowing that part of it is the mastery of the skill. But another part of it, especially most recently, is like the true adaptation changes to the tissue and to the system, right? That they're actually producing these things. So going back to kind of the original question that you asked is like, what do you get from it? I just want to see how quickly they can produce that response to the ground and what they can make of that ground contact, right? So over time, I would hope that the ground contacts stay the same or drop lower while the jump height stays the same or gets higher. And so essentially, I'm just looking at it as a way to zoom in maybe on a foot contact that I don't have the technology to do, like in a sprint. And just see, what is that ankle complex capable of? What's the stretch shortening cycle capable of? How efficient can you be with that response? And then that tells me a little bit about just the health, like you said, of the overall, under the knee area.
Sure.
And the productivity of that area. And, I have really good athletes that may not have the best RSI. You watch them hoop and you're like, you would call them springy, but that's because they're getting through the game that they love and they're suiting up for the team that they love and they're just grinding through it. But in training, they got these aches, these pains. They can't get that response from the Achilles that they want. So that's just where you kind of go in and try to, build them back up and not worry so much about the numbers. And like you said, look at the film and say, how can we marry these two together?
100%. Yeah. Love that. And that goes to say, like, just because I said I'm not using RSI doesn't mean it's non-useful, like that's, it's passed the test of time. So I'm glad you gave that explanation. I think that'll be a lot of, be very valuable to any coaches that hear it. Last thing here before we get to the end, you utilizing VBT has become part of your program. I'm a huge proponent of it. We both use Vitruv. We think they're one of the best products on the planet for this, especially in a practical setting and an affordability standpoint. What most coaches only use VBT for, like, they're big rock, certain things. When it comes to training your basketball players, what are some of the big rock exercises you're using it with? And talk me through your approach to it as far as how you're utilizing it to select loads.
So some of our major lifts will go like for a hands trap bar deadlift. And then that later will become like a trap bar jump. Really big on split squats with a safety squat bar.
Okay.
And front squats as well. Do a little bit of bench press. I track it for the guys that enjoy it. But more a little bit heavier on the dumbbells on that side of things. And then I've been utilizing, as of last off season, a rear foot elevated, like eccentric focused split squat, where you're basically just diving into that bottom position and trying to decelerate there. So we turn on the eccentric velocity on Vitruv and track that and try to maximize that number.
Ooh,
so
good point. Okay.
Yeah, that was a good one that I liked. A new addition. Trying to think of some other ones that I missed. And then every now and then we'll do like a rotational landmine press, or sometimes even a throw, where I'll just catch it. I can just release it and I'll catch the barbell, hand it back to them, and just get an output on that, just to more or less drive intent. I don't really have like a takeaway on what I'm doing with that data, but I just want that. You can get lazy on a landmine. It's kind of what I've noticed. Like, there's a little bit of, it does the work for you. You know what I mean? So
sure.
I just like to push intent on that. So my main thing, like on VBT, is just utilizing those velocity ranges to try to get the effort that I want and the stress that I want. So like on a trap bar deadlift, and I'm a little bit more on the conservative side, probably because I am working with a population that is a little bit more, magnified if things go wrong.
Sure.
But, I may stop a trap bar deadlift at like a 0.4. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
I'm not having no grinders. Like
Right.
we still got guys going 400 plus at 0.4 on a trap bar deadlift, which I'm happy with.
Correct.
If I see a 0.35, that'll probably be as low as I go. And, I know the data will say you can probably get a deadlift around 0.15 to 1.8, but I don't want to do that. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I don't want to do that. So a little bit more on the conservative side there. And then moving into, like trap bar jumps, we have different variations of kind of what we'll do with that.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll go body weight on the bar, max your velocity out as high as you can.
Peak or on a jump, you use peak there, or do you use
peak?
mean?
Yeah. Yep.
So body weight on the bar, trap bar jump.
Body weight on the bar.
Counter movement from the ground, or either one?
So we'll do both. Yeah. Sometimes I'll say we're going from the ground, dead stop every time. And then sometimes I'll say get it up first, and then I'll set the range of motion to, not count that, and then rebound from there and try to go as high as you can. So
cool.
That's one that we do. We'll do kind of aiming for a velocity zone with the trap bar jump as well, both from a dead stop and with the reflex built in. So on those, I look at the peak still, but I'll use like the mean propulsive velocity for that just to keep it consistent.
Yeah.
We'll have guys just try to go 1.0. Just see what you can get your feet off the ground with 1.0.
Yeah.
And we've gone way heavier than I would ever have expected. Like I've got guys going 300 plus
getting off the ground.
at 1 meter per second, get off the ground. And I'm like, yo,
Justin, that was my breaking point of getting rid of Olympic lifting. That's a whole nother concept. We don't have time to talk about that, but that was because I had a linebacker back in 21, our middle linebacker, who was a stud, really good Olympic lifter, strong 400-pound squatter, but could only catch a clean at like 265, 270, and then, I saw him move like 360 at like 1.0.
Crazy.
And I was like, okay, just from an output standpoint, and then there's other reasons for that, but that was like the first like light bulb moment for me of like, maybe I should consider that, and then
100%.
The beauty of VBT along with that is like, it now no longer becomes get the lift up and that becomes boring. VBT is also an engagement tool. Like it keeps you gamified. Now there's a million different ways to PR. Not just
100%.
how heavy, and it makes lifting weights, which is the whole point, is to get them engaged into the training because we know the adaptations are going to yield good things, but it makes them now give that intent, which therefore is going to supercharge the stimulus.
Yep.
You can't put a price tag on that, man.
Nope.
Like
100%.
As much as I'd like to say I'm still a pretty good coach, and if I just had a rusty barbell and some weights and some dumbbells, I could still get the job done. I could, but man, I just thought, man, I've got Vitruv on every rack, and I'm using it every single session from 14-year-olds all the way up to 18-year-olds and my NFL draft prep guys in the spring, like all those. And I want to recommend, tell everybody, like not just from pumping Vitruvs, but even if whatever velocity unit that you like the best, try it out. A lot of these companies give trials. I know Vitruv does. If you want to know, you can hit Justin up, you can hit me up. If you want a free trial of a Vitruv unit, hit one of us up. I promise you, we'll get you one. And
dude,
and go from there.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Like I can't imagine not using VBT, and I don't mean that like in a way of like kind of like looking down on people that don't. It's just like, dude, it's so valuable. It's just like totally changed the way that I approach training.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's a million ways to PR. Like another one for trap bar jump is like, we made this on a light day, we'll go like 135 on the bar. And I'm just saying range of motion. Who can jump the highest with this, right?
Compete.
Use that range of motion filter. And so, like you said, there's so many benefits to it, from the gamification to the actual data itself and what you do with that data. But it's just an easy tool to help you Like there's so many things in training that you could be worried about.
Yeah.
And this
No doubt.
quantifies a lot of them. And so you can I'm just not smarter than a computer. You know what I'm
No.
saying? Like I'm just not. And any help that I can get from a device that's smarter than me, like I'm going to value that. So yeah, like you
100%.
said, I love it.
I had, an analogy that pops up that I've said multiple times that I've actually heard from other coaches is like when you have good tech or you have good incentives where like if the score goes up, you did something good, it's not muddy, especially with like training. I think of like a basketball coach. Let's use basketball as an example. Like at the end of the game, if you only had the final score to prep for the next game, you didn't have film, you didn't have stats. That would be pretty tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the weight room, you got X amount of weight up or didn't. Now with VBT, you've got your stats, you've got your field goal percentage, you have your assist to turnover ratio.
That is a phenomenal.
You know what I'm saying?
Dude,
okay, now we can break down. I can break down how this happened.
That's your box score.
Yeah. So I'm like, same thing. Like, just because you did not put up, 27 and 8 like LeBron does in the playoffs, like where was your value on the team for the guys that play in the NBA for 10 years and they're 12-minute a game guys who guard and rebound their freaking tails off, but they're not going to you're going to see it in a different part of the box score. So I'm like, there's value there.
That's amazing. You just gave me wow.
Yeah. That's game, right? Like that's a way to show like, hey, we're competing in different ways with the barbell now. I've got more information to make better decisions and be able to place you in the place you need to be able to be successful. And sometimes that's not always with the ball scoring a bucket in a team game. So I've always used that analogy. I use it with football, use it with baseball or whoever. When it comes to VBT, I'm like, why would you not? You want to tell a coach, nope, you're not allowed to look at the film. You won.
Right.
Go prepare.
Yeah. That's a great analogy, man.
Yeah. So I'll throw you that one because I figured you'd enjoy that. But last thing before we go, like I said, I always ask 2 questions at the end of a podcast to kind of get our brains turning. If you could name one item over your career that you felt like you've changed your mind the most on, what would it be?
Oh, man. I would say, damn, this is tough.
It is a tough one because there's probably a lot, but it doesn't have to be anything profound. It can be something super simple.
There's a lot. I would say what I've changed the most within the last 5 years is my model in speed development has gone from one end of the continuum to the other in terms of like technical model versus output-based model.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
I used to be very technical. Like very like sprint.
A-skip, hand to pocket, wall drill.
Like very, very, very sprint-based model taken from people that only run straight for 10 seconds at a time.
Right.
And so I've changed to a way more output-based model, probably 70-30 in terms of output versus technical. We'll still do some technical drills and try to enhance some things that could potentially lead to injury or bad positions or just, better speed in general. But I've surfed that curve and now I'm more output based. Like let's sprint, let's get a time, let's beat the time. If it looks ugly, we'll try to make it look better. But I'm not really trying to train sprinters. You know what I mean? I'm trying to train hoopers to accelerate fast. And that's what I've changed probably the most in the last 5 years.
Love it. I'd say I'm pretty much the same. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And the last question is, what rabbit hole are you going down right now? Like, what's intriguing you? What's something you're trying to investigate a little bit?
So right now, I'm really into like the deceleration is back popular. You know what I'm saying? Like 10 years ago, like snap downs were like like in, right?
Yeah.
And then they became not cool anymore and you get made fun of if you did them. But now people are doing snap downs just from a box, right? But they're showing data that's possibly valuable.
Sure.
And so I have not done any of the drop landings or altitude training. But it's interesting me. Like I mentioned those eccentric based split squats where we're essentially is kind of what we're doing just with load. I'm interested because I was looking at a study and it was about like ACL tears in the NBA. And I can't remember, but I think like 16% of them were vertical based. Everything else was horizontal based. So there's there's some kind of disconnect there. People are not tearing ACLs coming down from jumps as often as they are from cutting.
Correct.
But there's value in that eccentric loading and the deceleration, and how do we, I don't know. There's something there. I'm not all in. I'm not all in on drop landings yet, and I'm not saying they're good or bad. But there's something there. Like, deceleration is massively important. If you look at the game, like the change of directions, you look at the best players, how good they are at changing directions and reaccelerating, the positions they get in. There's something there. I don't know how to train it yet. And
but
there's
you're going to
people
chase
that
it
are,
and try to find out.
Yeah, I'm listening to a lot of NBA trainers on podcasts and PTs from the NBA. There's something there. I don't know what it is, but that's kind of what's got my interest right now, and trying to figure out what's there.
Awesome. Love it. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on and chopping up with me for an hour. This is a great show. A lot of value. I know I've learned quite a bit from you today. And, if somebody really was intrigued by something you said, or they want to expand on it a little bit, maybe ask you a question, how would you prefer they reach out to you?
You can just hit me on Instagram or Twitter, Justin Ochoa 317. That's kind of my tag across the board. So, Yeah, man, reach out. Always looking to connect with people. And I really appreciate you having me on, man. It's great to kind of catch up with you and learn more about you as well. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt. Sweet. All right, guys, till next time. Appreciate you, Justin.
Yes, sir.